All right, episode 2 of the Healer Theory series. I'm Icy with Icy Fire Gaming, and my co-host is Shoddy. How you doing, Shoddy?
Hey, doing just fine.
Hey! Oh, Lord. Okay, so in this episode, we're going to basically talk about 1-bar builds versus 2-bar builds, what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and just kind of have a conversation and see where it goes from there. I think we're both not prepared for this, so we're just kind of free flow it and see what happens. You ready, Shoddy?
I am.
All right. So, why haven't you adopted a 1-bar build?
Because there's no point.
Oh shoot. Okay.
So, in my opinion, I don't see, like, if you're playing, trying to be as good as you can be with healing, I still think 2-bar's better.
So, this is why I wanted to have this episode, right? Because me and you, we both played at a competitive level, right? I guess within our sandbox of a BG community. And we have very similar results, right? Where I beat you in healing in one particular game, you beat me in healing in another particular game. We come out almost around the same every single time, but there's context to the situation. Is my team or your team third partying, things like that, in terms of like why one comes up and one doesn't. And for the most part, it's pretty much the same, right? Aside from just the play style, we're both having similar healing numbers, I think.
I think on the surface, on the scoreboard, it's really hard to tell, like, because you can only get a number based on the amount of, damage you healed for, and
right.
That there's so many variables to that, like how much damage your team deal, how much damage did your team receive? Was it a lot of damage over time? Was it AoE, single target? Is it just burst that they're receiving?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that takes in place. Because, like, if you're just suddenly receiving a lot of burst damage at once, your healing may not be that high, but maybe your build is still just really good in keeping your team alive and all that.
Right.
Whereas another healer may be receiving a whole lot of damage over time, and just throughout that game, they healed a lot more damage than you did, because it's, over and more, it's like an even curve instead of just spikes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll look like it was a lot more, but in reality, it was just that constant flow that, it's different.
Yeah. And I know, at least from between both of our builds, we're able to weather the storm consistently when my team is going against your team, or like even throwing a third team there, right? We're able to go with the flow of combat, if you would, right? Because especially when you have, again, all that consistent sustained damage with DKs and what else? Sorks, and I don't even know what else. I don't play DPS. I just know how to heal from all this stuff.
Well, when there's a lot of combos and there's a lot of pressure, and you just you're able to survive all the mix and match of damage types.
Yeah, but from what you were saying in the beginning, right? You said, what the hell did you just say? You said that if you want to maximize something.
I was talking about how the scoreboard really is vague and doesn't tell the full story.
Mm-hmm. Hey, okay. Well, I guess we'll just continue off that point then. So I hate when people, they get so excited, like, oh, check out my healing numbers, 3 million, 4 million, 6 million heals. My first thought is, okay, you were in a BG where everyone's kind of just jerking each other off, right? You're letting one team, not like you're letting them, but one team is just doing so much more damage, and your team is healing, or you're healing all that incoming damage. Okay, great. Your numbers are gonna be so inflated. But then you look at the kill to death ratio. Okay, for me as a healer, when a healer posts their healing numbers, I don't really care about the healing number. I care about what their kill death ratio is. If you have 1 or 2 deaths and you have high healing numbers, you're still trash, in my opinion. Hot take. Oh, Jesus Christ. I didn't mean to say that, but it is what it is. Because
No,
again, I think, we can both agree on this. A dead healer is useless.
Yeah. So give you an example. A healer with no deaths, their team has like almost no deaths, and they only heal 2 million, versus a healer with 5-6 million healing, but they have like 2 deaths, and their team all have 2 or 3 deaths each person.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the healer, the first example, is actually a better healer because their team died less, and they probably won because no dying. It doesn't matter that you got that extra healing numbers. The fact that you are dying more just means that you're losing the fight.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that one team was probably using burst and one was using damage over time.
Right. So, since we're talking about healing numbers, I gotta figure out how to tie it back to 1 bar versus 2 bar, because I feel like whenever we start talking about it, we kind of go off tangent into something about healing in general. But I mean, even in both scenarios, right? A 1 bar, 2 bar scenario, we'll say in terms of survivability, I'd say it's pretty much very easy. I mean, honestly, I'd say I have the easier time because I don't have to bar swap to get to the bar to my back bar to escape, right? I just have to press my Deceptive Predator. We're both using Wardens in this example because because
you're trolling if you're not using a Warden.
Yeah, you're trolling if you're not. So it's very easy for me to escape since again I have all my buffs up, right? There's no downtime between me having something not available and then being in a weakened state, right? I can just hit my Deceptive Predator, I get my Major Expedition, and then I can reposition accordingly. Whereas in a 2 bar setup, right, you gotta play the mini game, of course, of keeping your buffs up, which arguably, if you're a good player, it's not a big deal. Okay, and people say, yeah, right.
I was gonna say, like, I don't ever find myself running out of armor or anything over here. All of my stuff's up, even at the worst moments.
It's so funny because when I was learning or first getting into PvP, buff management was always a thing that I struggled with, and even to this day, I would still, I not like I would argue against people saying it, but I know I still have trouble with buff management, or not buff management, but let's just say uptime management, because I know you've said it in my live stream, Shoddy. You'd be like, I see. Why are you letting your leeching vines drop off?
I said you got 5 buttons and you still only using 4 of them.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's just, I don't know, dude. I've been playing this game for 3 years, and I know my level as a healer is definitely up there, but there's still things that I'm just not good at. And that's just the way it is. I can still keep my team alive, whatever, but there's some moments where I'm just like, I haven't pressed Echoing Vigor in a while. Or like, why is this ability on my bar if I'm not using it? And I think that's one of the benefits to playing a 1 bar setup, right? That external pressure allows me to, I guess, I'm not saying punch above my weight, but it's just one less thing I have to worry about, because I already struggle with buff uptimes, and now you're telling me, okay, you're giving me all the buffs at 100% uptime, and I'm still not even able to get all my skills off and keep them up 100% of the time. Okay, that's on me. So I guess you could almost say like Oaken Soul's a crutch in a way, but even then, you still got to be somewhat competent, I think, to still perform well at a high level.
Well, because I'm on the side of 2 bar, I can't really say much for Oaken Soul. That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
But for certain, 2 bar has more uptime management, but if you're able to do that, the thing about the 2 bar, and it's just, that's how it is that you're going to have more ability slots to do more things.
Mm-hmm.
You have more utility slots, so, I can use Shimmering Shield. You can't use Shimmering Shield. I mean, you can, but you're going to be missing so much healing without that.
Right.
As a 1 bar, you pretty much are stuck with just slotting as many healing abilities as possible in order to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
As a 2 bar, I have a lot of utility. I can use things like Shimmering Shield. I have both Polar Wind and Blessing of Restoration, so that I can get that minor courage for me and my team, and still have the amazing burst heal of Polar Wind. And there's a lot of other things that I have as well.
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that a 2-bar can only do.
It's so funny because when I used to run my 2-bar setups, and then when I looked at your 2-bar setup from last episode, if you guys want to check that out, shameless plug. You have much more activity going on with your setup than I used to have with my setups, because I would put slottables on my back bar just so I have less things to do so I can focus on doing other stuff. And because you have more active abilities, I just think, I don't know how the hell you're doing all this stuff, because that's way too many buttons to even manage, in my opinion. But obviously it's manageable, right? I just suck.
Yeah.
I'm just terrible 2-bar healer.
Well, it is a lot of buttons, but so far I would say I'd keep up with everything, like budding seeds every 6 seconds, my shimmering shield just about every 6 seconds. You know, all my 10 and 15-second abilities, they stay up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I even find myself having time to just do a heavy attack.
Whoa. Jesus Christ. But again, your recoveries are so high too, so it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah.
Well, the reason I do that, and this isn't really like a 1-bar, 2-bar thing, but the reason that I do heavy attacks occasionally is because Radiating and Echo have like a memory thing that works with them. So if you heavy attack and give them major mending, that major mending will extend through the entire duration of those abilities, not just the 4 seconds. So if you want to maximize your healing potential on those abilities, it's actually a good idea to heavy attack, then cast them.
Right. So if you already have, say, a Radiant Regeneration or Echoing Vigor already active, and then you major mending and then press some other abilities, it's not going to proc major mending for your stuff that's already in progress. It's going to only affect the stuff after the fact. So you have to recast those abilities to get the buff that Shadi's talking about. Which, funny enough, I just learned that, I think, like 2 months ago when we were talking about it. Yeah, the testing. Oh, it was after update 35, right? When they first made those changes, when they nerfed Echoing Vigor and those things. Yeah. So, the more you know, the more you know. But again, this is a healing channel where we know everything.
Yes.
All the details that you need to know. So
another thing about 2-bar builds is that I can use 2 weapons, so I'm not just stuck with the resto staff. I have the sword and board as well. I can get stamina heavy attacks, magic heavy attacks, and most importantly, I have a sword and shield block, which is far superior to a resto staff block.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of the reason why I still maintain having sturdy on my setups, because when I need to block, I need to be able to block, and I lose that huge mitigation of the sword and board back bar by just having a front bar only resto staff. So when I block, I need to be able to mitigate as much of that cost as possible, which is why I still run a full 7 sturdy setup on my resto staff.
Yeah, and where you see me using sturdy plus in-pin on my setup in contrast, because I can afford to do that.
Yeah. And I guess I do have a little bit more mitigation, especially when you play a class that isn't the Warden, because I get that major resolve 100% of the time, as well as the minor protection. But again, everybody's got major resolve, so I guess that doesn't really count. But minor protection, which naturally comes with the Warden kit, if you're using Ice Fortress, will now extend to the other classes that don't have access to minor protection as easily as the Warden, or as naturally, I'll say, as the Warden. So that's I think in those respects, Oaken Soul puts the other classes up toward, or a bit closer to the Warden. Obviously not at the same level, but just kind of closer up. Maybe just +1 up on the tier list, if there was.
Yeah, it helps them out. And maybe that is the better way to play the other class healers, is as an Oaken Soul healer.
Yeah, and since you mention it, a lot of the other classes don't have access to major sorcery, right? Templar healer, Shoddy, I know that's your favorite. The Necro doesn't have major sorcery access. What else? The Nightblade, it has it in its kit, but it wouldn't come naturally, in my opinion, on a healer to get major sorcery. The Warden gets it naturally. The Sork gets it naturally. The DK, I guess for the weird people out there that do run an actual legit DK healer, yeah, if you're using molten armaments, I guess, then yeah, you would get it. But if you're running something else, then yeah, you wouldn't naturally. But yeah, I would say the Sork, DK, and Warden get it naturally. So Oaken Soul helps the other 3 classes out in that respect, which is pretty good. So
I guess.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say another thing is you have. I would say you have mythic flexibility, and you do have mythic flexibility as a 2-bar. But really, it comes down to the fact that you can use death dealers and get extra HP on top of it, which as a Warden healer is very useful. Because I'm in CP, I get 47,500. I don't know where your build lands in the HP department.
I think if I'm really pushing it, I could get as well. I guess we're just sticking with the Wardens, right? So yeah. I think I can get around 41k.
Around 41.
Yeah, 41.
I mean, it's still above 40k, so that's not bad. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think any healer should be under 40k at all times.
It's so funny because when I hear you say these things for the first time, like months ago, I'm just like, God damn, this guy's off his rocker. But over the months, I learn and understand why these things are, and then I change my way of thinking. I'm like, you know what? He's right. Especially when you can naturally just get to 40k, depending on how your setup is. I have to play with it, and I can almost guarantee it on a Warden because I get the minor toughness. But aside from that, and all the other classes, you're not going to get close to 40k unless you're running some crazy stuff. But because you're running your 2-bar setup and you have the mythic flexibility, but let's be honest, if you're not running death dealers, you're trolling. So, that's that's the secret to your setup, right? To getting those high health numbers. Because Death Dealer's Feat naturally puts you at 25k Magicka and allowing you to just dump 64 points into health, which I still think is ridiculous, but still amazing at the same time.
At 64, I mean, you can do 64 on DPS too. Come on.
I don't even know what to say to that, but I know you're working. I know you're working on a DPS setup, so I'll be curious to see what that looks like in a couple weeks.
I mean, I know a lot of people who put 64 HP in the DPS builds as well, but I don't know. It's a natural thing. It's how you survive in the game, and that goes the same for healers.
And yeah, so I guess going back to your point though, the 2-bar setup, it has so much flexibility with mythics, even though again you'd only be running death dealers, so it doesn't really matter. The attribute setup, right, depending on your particular build, right, you're able to really push the limits in whatever direction that you want to go in. And what else? Sets?
Yeah, sets. So there's a lot of different combinations you can do. You can wear, 5-piece body set. You can run front bar, back bar with a mythic and a monster. You can do arenas. You have a lot of options, and of course everybody knows who has watched the previous episode knows what I run, which I think is the best 2-bar build, but there's a lot of options out there.
Right. Could you run a 2 support sets on your setup? Or you'd have to change or rearrange things?
It would really change things up. I have ran 3 support sets, front bar, back bar, and a monster support on healer before. But I think that when it comes to being a healer, the number one job is to first not die. Because a dead healer is useless, right?
Yep.
The second job is to make sure that your teammates don't die. And then the third job is to help them with buffs, help them with kills, That is third place. So in my opinion, it is more important to make sure you have the resources, the defenses, and the ability to keep you and them alive, and everything else comes after. So that's why I lean more towards making sure that I get that stuff through sets, like, my build, Wretched Vitality and Blood Spawn. And then after that, then yes, you can put on something like SPC or Powerful Soul or Rallying Cry to help your team out
Mm-hmm.
and yourself.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, you can do that. I just think that it's better to focus on survivability because that's kind of the point of the healer.
Yeah. And I think, well, at least with my setups, when I run my old console builds, I naturally do, right, your mitigation set and then a support set. And then depending on the context, which is pretty much if I'm doing small scale, like 4 to 6 man in open world, Citadel or Imperial City, then I'll typically pull off a mitigation set and run some other support set, preferably a heavy armor support set like Arcasis, and run that instead, because we're usually, if we manage to do 6 man, then we have 2 healers in the group, and then it's able to more than keep me alive with that lack of mitigation I would naturally have running the other set instead, and I'm able to do what I need to do to get the job done. But again, because I lack the versatility in my setups, I'm only stuck to 2 types, right? I can do a 5-5-1, right? 2 5-piece sets and my old console, or I do a 5-piece, a monster set, 2-piece, and then some 3-piece set like willpower or potentates, or maybe even run an arena set or something like that. So once you start getting to like the 5-2-3-1, then it gets a little funky, but it depends on what your team needs. So I'm only limited to those 2 things, whereas like you were saying, Shadi, you can do front bar, back bar, do whatever you want. You're able to get 4 sets with your setup, whereas I'm only limited to 2 and maybe 3, but then that's like a weird 3 that doesn't really, like, the value that I'm giving myself or my team just gets all convoluted. So, okay, so we got utility, versatility. I'm trying to think what else. I guess stat wise, I know because Oakensoul gives me so much, I have some. What's the phrase I'm looking for here? There's some things that come out on top, right, that you wouldn't naturally have, like minor heroism, right? You don't naturally get that anywhere unless you're wearing shocks.
Not naturally, but you can just use a potion.
But those potions are expensive.
They are, but it just depends how much money you have. And then, I admittedly, I don't use them very often. I do have them on my person if I decide I want to use them.
Mm-hmm.
But admittedly, I don't use them against just the random Joe, right?
Right.
It would be for a fight where it matters, people that you don't like or whatever.
Mm-hmm. gotta start crank up the heat for the people you don't like, yeah. And then when they whisper you, just the first thing you say is, "Please stop harassing me."
Mm-hmm.
So, love that. So,
but yeah, admittedly, yes, you don't constantly have it like you would as an Oakensoul user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my favorite part is the major prophecy that we get when running Oakensoul, because you don't really invest in crit chance on normal 2-bar builds, and unless you're gonna slot like Mage Light or something on there, and that's something I used to do when I used to run like some crit setups on my 2-bar builds, but now I just naturally get it. So if you wanted to run a crit Oakensoul setup, it'd be very easy to do since you're already starting off at like 22% crit chance, which is really nice.
Yeah, I don't use crit on my build, and I don't really think there's a room for crit. It's like not bad. One of the biggest disadvantages for crit is I play Warden, right? And they have the best, or one of the best crit buff abilities in the game because it goes on the front and the back bar, and it heals in addition.
Mm-hmm.
One of the downsides of that, though, is where you are a 2-bar build, you often are going to be using Sword and Shield. And if you're not getting light attacks off every single second, if you're not doing your light attack weaves to near perfection, you're losing out on that ability, and you're not going to get the healing impact that you should be getting from it. And so I tend not to use it because I'm more focused on looking at my allies and healing them and focusing on healing them, or I'm blocking damage. And the Sword and Shield doesn't have the reach of a ranged weapon as well. A lot of times I'm on the Sword and Shield bar and I can't reach my target, so no light attacks. And so just that, a lot of times it's not proccing. So
you're talking about Lotus Blossom, right?
Yeah, Green Lotus.
Green Lotus, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just decide I don't need crit.
And that would be a third buff on top of Ice Fortress and Betty or Bullnets, right?
Yeah, it'd be another buff, but to be honest, it would actually save me in time overall, because any ability that I would be using, that I would be replacing in its place, probably has a lower time than it does, because it's 20 seconds, so it's not that bad.
20 seconds after the buff? Or is it
20 seconds when you cast it.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure if they bumped it up to 30 and then the other one to 60.
No, it's still 20, and I think you should be using Green Lotus, not the other one.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's the thing with all these buffs, man. Like, 2 is already... I feel like 2 is the standard. 1 is like, okay, you're just a little bit special. I mean, 0, you're really special. But, dude, 3 buffs you have to upkeep? Oh, my God. Like, that's a complete turn off for me, man. No, thank you.
Well,
Because I know Lotus is really good, but...
To be honest, like... If I used Lotus, that would save me on cooldowns, again, like I said, because all my other stuff has shorter durations.
Right. No, I understand that. No, that's legit too.
Because, like, if you really look at it, everything's a buff, right? Your Blessing's a buff. Your Radiating Regen is a healing buff, essentially, you know? It's healing over time. It has a duration just like everything else.
Right.
All that stuff, to me, is the same thing. It's just, you know, some of them are really short durations, like Budding Seeds or Shimmering Shield, and some of them aren't. It's quite too short, like Ice Fortress.
So, since you kind of were touching upon light attacks, one thing I did notice, Shoddy, between me and you is I tend to have higher damage than you, right? And we're talking from a healer perspective, right? Like, you'll have maybe 100 something K and I'll have 200 something K, right? Very pitiful, right? Because it's all pretty much just light attacks the whole time. But I know it's very easy for me to light attack because I have a ranged weapon at all times and I'm always light attacking. And from what you're saying, it sounds like you're kind of you're like 50-50, but if anything, I'd probably say you're mostly on your sorting board. So you're not able to generate as much ultimate naturally by light attacking as well as contributing to some damage. Not that we need to actually contribute, right? But
well, my ultimate is always rolling, you know, the light attack ultimate. That should be always rolling. But yeah, my light attack weaving is very weak in comparison to an Oakensoul build. Because normally I'm in the front line with my allies where I'm extra tanky, right, on my build. A lot of times I'm absorbing the damage, and in fact I'm always at least twice the amount of healing on myself than I am for anybody else on my team. I'm almost a tank as well as a healer.
I mean, we basically pretty much are, though, right? Like, yeah, the best healer is a tank healer, if we're gonna just outright say it.
Yeah, but, you know, a lot of times I go out into the front line. I'm holding block, which reduces the amount of CCs that can prevent me from doing the things I need to be doing. Block healing and doing all that stuff. And so I'm not generating light attacks.
Right. And that just comes naturally with the role, though, you know? So it's not like it'd be, oh, I'm at a disadvantage because I got a hold block. No, you're doing your part, being a target, being a nice juicy target that nobody can kill. Whereas for me, it's I gotta be a little more careful with it because even though I'm full sturdy, I don't have all those nice blocking benefits that you do on your sorting board bar.
Yeah, because I think even after all this sturdy, I still get more blocking cost reduction.
Yeah, I think you get like what 36% just from sorting board alone.
Sorting board, yeah. So you get 36%. And then I definitely get more blocking mitigation as well. So it just it blocks more in addition.
Yeah, and you can move a little quicker too when you're holding block, which is I think kind of underrated, but still really nice.
Yeah, you also block more projectile damage as well, 12%.
Oh, actually, you know what? When I block with a Resto Staff, I think I absorb Magicka if it's a spell.
Yeah, so if it's a spell, you get mag return at the cost of your stam. So there's benefits to both, but it generally should be, if you can, you should be blocking with the sword and shield.
Yeah, preferably, yeah. Especially if you're on a 2-bar setup. So, okay. Well, we're hitting that 30-minute mark, and I know we want to keep this one relatively short. You got anything else you want to add, Shawnee?
No, we can summarize. I would say that 2-bar builds are more flexible. They generally have more stats unless you're talking about heroism and crit.
Mm-hmm.
And they have more utility in regards to the abilities that they can use.
Yes. And for the Oakensoul setup, I think it brings the other classes that lack some of those buffs that other classes would naturally have, like Major Sorcery, Major Brutality, things like that. Minor Protection. It helps bring them up, which is really nice. And I guess on an individual personal level, if you're truly somebody that is not good at buff management, then Oakensoul might be there for you, right? If you truly cannot get good and learn how to maintain your buffs, like majority of the player base, then Oakensoul is right up your alley.
That's actually not true. Most of the player base don't know how to do that.
Oh, really?
It's the majority, not the minority.
Oh, damn! I thought everybody was kind of competent, and it was just me.
No.
So I'm in the majority as a shitter. Oh.
Yes.
Well, that's okay because I'm the best shitter. As long as I'm the best, then I'm good. Then I'm good. So, yeah, if you want to play other classes that aren't the Warden and you don't want to play a mini game with your buff and you think you suck, Oakensoul you think you suck, Oakensoul might be right up your alley because it can still perform at a optimal level as a 2-bar build. But, you have to be very particular and careful with your setup because you don't want to do like a mix and match, because then if you're going to call yourself a healer and then you have some damage abilities on, then you're not really a healer because you need everything that you can get.
Yeah. I'll actually pitch in for 1-bar builds. Another thing that they have is that they're going to be able to have a better uptime on their major mending, just because they can have more time to heavy attack.
Mm-hmm.
They have more time to cast the same ability over and over. So like Polar Wind, you can cast Polar Wind multiple times before you need to go back and do buff management, because you only got like 3 other abilities you need to work on,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I got like another 8 or 9.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think part of the reason why I do beat a lot of healers is because I heavy attack so much, and I think my major mending uptime is higher than most people, since that's kind of like, because your recoveries are so much higher than mine, I have to naturally weave a lot more, I think, than most people have to.
Yeah, I don't actually have to heavy attack. I just do it for the apply major mending to my heal over time so that they get it for their full duration. I mean, I do have to, but that's only when it's really getting pressured. I don't, if it's light pressure, I don't really actually have to do heavy attacks at all.
Nice. Okay. Well, in the famous words of Mr. Beast, if you want to maintain retention, you got to cut the videos quick before anybody can leave.